So here we are in front of the Pathfoot building, and behind me is the Pursuit of Knowledge sculpture, or more commonly known as the Blue Boy. The Pursuit of Knowledge is a sculpture specifically commissioned for the university campus. It is the memorial sculpture for Tom Cottrell, and it's supposed to represent a young man contemplating his future, staring into the distance and looking at a crystal which he's holding in his hand. It's particularly apt because Tom Cottrell himself was a crystallographer, studied crystals, so it's really good that this sculpture represents his passion and research. It's done by an artist called Ian McCall, and I think, you know, people recognise this sculpture. If you see a photograph of it, you really know that you're in Stirling. We've tried to link the sculpture to our health and well-being programmes, and we've done this by working with two artists, Heidi and Peter Gardner, or Gardner and Gardner, and they spent 2 weeks on campus working with staff and students. They located themselves in the crush hall within the Pathfoot building and set up a peacemakers loom, which was a kind of collective space where people could join them throughout the weeks to collectively create a piece of wool and to weave. But while they were doing it, they'd spend time talking and discussing and sort of created sort of temporary community around the loom. And after the weeks were over, we had 2 big balls of wool, and actually what we did was we wrapped the entire plinth of the Blue Boy in brightly coloured wool, which was beautiful, and it was kind of a collective work by the people who'd been participating in it and really kind of highlighted the health and well-being programmes that we're doing here at Stirling.
I'm now standing in a courtyard of the Pathfoot building, and you find me between 2 sculptures by Nick Evans. These sculptures are called King and Queen, and King and Queen are made of brushed aluminium, although it looks a little bit like concrete. They're made by Nick Evans, who is a Glasgow-based artist. He was born in Zambia, but he moved to England, studied in England, and then finally at Glasgow School of Art. And he still now works in Glasgow. So these 2 works were sited by us in this particular courtyard because this is where the staff of the history department used to work, and they overlooked the historic King and Queen. The creative writing students at the time used these pieces for inspiration for some of their work and their writing. So siting sculpture is really important, and one of the things that we did when we sited King and Queen here was put King in line with the 2 trees here, so that there was a diagonal intervention into the courtyard. And then we sited Queen on the left, diagonally opposite that way. One of the things we had to do though, King and Queen should actually be more intimate together, but because they're sited in the grass and we need to cut the grass, the mowing machines have to come between the 2, so they've had to be separated a little bit.
Here we are at the bottom of Pathfoot Drive, and I wanted to stop and talk about this sculpture here called Nostalgia. This is by an artist called Hironori Katagiri, and we will be talking about another sculpture of his, the 21st of June 1985. So this piece, Nostalgia, is all around the idea about how we're shaped by the experiences that we have. This was originally 1 piece of Scottish red granite, and it was split into 40 individual pieces, and then it was put back together, slightly changed and polished, but essentially on first glance looks like 1 solid piece of stone. And the idea is that when something happens, like a bereavement or any kind of experience that we have within our lives, although we may look the same, we're inalterably changed by what's happened to us. And nostalgia is thinking about that and pondering on the sort of reality of how we change throughout our lives. And it's been a real inspiration to students and to staff and visitors to the university who kind of know the story behind the sculpture. And certainly some students from the CMC department in the university have created podcasts, and it harks back to the idea of the campus and the art being a source of inspiration for people, whether it be creative writing, whether it be song, dance, music, that you can take a lot from your natural surroundings in many, many different ways. So the pieces that they created were reflecting on their experience and what they learned from this piece of art.
So each year the university worked with the Charles Wallace India Trust, and we invite a creative writer from India to come and work in the university and be inspired by the landscape, the art, the music of Scotland. And they're here for 3 months every spring. So we've developed a project called the House of Words, where whenever the creative writer is with us, they create something that they leave with us. So they leave us a poem or a verse, and we display that verse on the windows in the Pathfoot building. So as you journey around Pathfoot, you're not only seeing the art, but you're seeing the writing on the glass. So we bought this sculpture, Mary and Elizabeth, in 2016 from the artist Jackie Donachie. We're very fortunate with the art collection to be supported a lot by the National Fund for Acquisitions, and they supported this purchase together with a lot of other purchases we've been able to make for the art collection. So Jackie Donachie's piece, this Mary and Elizabeth, was originally commissioned for the Edinburgh International Art Fair. So it was first displayed and sited in Princes Street Gardens in Edinburgh. But then when the exhibition was finished, it was stored in Jackie's store. So we were able to purchase it from her. It's appropriate to be cited at Stirling University because this is a story about Elizabeth I and Mary Queen of Scots, and they were cousins. And Mary's son James VI was James VI of Scotland and then became James I of England. And he was christened in Stirling Castle behind us. So we've cited this sculpture with the dominant cousin, Elizabeth, at the top of the hill, Mary here in the trees with her back to the castle, kind of defending her son, and James VI behind us being christened in Stirling Castle.
I'm going to talk about the artist Alec Finlay. In the context of the campus's inspiration, one of the things that we have regularly is an artist in residence programme. Alec was the university's first artist in residence in 2013, where he was funded by the Leverhulme to work on a creative survey of the UK bee population. Alec is a former graduate of Stirling University and remembers fondly being here. And this sculpture here, the Mind Hive, was originally located in the university library. The idea behind it was that the library is very much like a kind of hive for a colony of bees, with students going out into the library, getting books from different subjects and bringing them back and learning more. So each week we change the book in here, and each week it's a different book relating to bee history. Alongside this sculpture, there are over 20 individual bee libraries around campus, and if you go wander around the loch or around the various parts of the university, you'll see what looks to be like a book hanging in the trees. What it is a bee library, and each of the books is on a different subject about bee history, and inside them are little tubes where the individual bees can hibernate. So not only is it a beautiful sculpture, it's also a practical thing to help encourage the bee population on campus. This sculpture by artist Diane McLean is located directly opposite Ettrick Castle, and behind it you've got the fantastic University Arboretum with the garden cottage and the walled gardens behind. And this is kind of a historic site of the university campus, and this is why we decided that we'd locate it here, because of the wonderful wildlife and all the shrubberies. And this is one of 3 works of Diane's on campus. 2 of them are dedicated to bird themes. So we've got Plume and we've also got this sculpture, Wing. Diane herself is an environmental artist, and she started her work as a portrait artist and then moved on to sculpture, and firstly in wood and stone, but now works a lot in steel. And when we brought this work onto campus, we decided we would locate it here, not only because of this historic environment, but because of the fact that actually when we looked at the campus map, we realised that beneath our feet there's a lot of gas pipes, electricity wires, water pipes, and to make this wing look seamlessly like it's floating above the air, we've actually got to install large rods cemented in concrete deep into the ground. So when we've got the kind of wonderful and diverse Scottish weather that we often have here, this is going to stay in place and going to be a beautiful sculpture. And you often see children wandering around it, occasionally hitting it with sticks, but it makes quite a rhythmic sound, but I wouldn't advise that. This work by artist Diane McLean is called Shoe, and it was inspired by Kildrummy Castle and the idea of fortresses and the Tower of the Shoe transposing from the castle across the loch onto the other side. It's a real focus for visitors to campus. Children love it. A lot of time you've got a lot of children climbing all over it. And we used it with working with a storyteller who came onto campus and worked with little under 4-year-olds, telling them about the sculpture, but pretending it was a giant shoe, and the giant had lost his shoe and he was looking for it. And the kids loved it and were really excited by the idea that there was a giant roaming around here somewhere who'd lost his shoe.
In 2020, the university added its voice to a Black Lives Matter mural trail, which invited artists all over Scotland to create installations in their cities and to describe their experiences of racism. So we were fortunate to invite Suzanne Williams, who lives in Nallowa, to provide this sculpture, Do Better. The sculpture says, do better. We need to do better to make a difference, and invites us all to add the names of people to the work, the people who have in our society made a difference in the last 400 years, people of colour who've made a difference in the last 400 years. So this artwork will be here for some time. It's a temporary installation, but we're using it in some of our teaching modules, and the students will be taught in front of it here. It sits right at the end of the link bridge, so students who come to the university will cross the bridge from the residences to the public spaces, and they'll encounter this work which very clearly says do better, and we hope that it makes a difference.